Marvel Snap is on a great run. They just released 3 consecutive good cards. Surely they won't mess this up. I'm being informed that they may have messed this up. Red Wolf, Fractured Frontier, is not very good. He costs 2, he has 1 power, and whenever you play him, he gains as much power as there are cards in your hand. He also has a quick draw that if you play him on the turn you drew him, he will buff your hand's power by +1. So every card in your hand will get +1 more power. This is not, in a vacuum, a bad thing. It's mostly context that makes Red Wolf a card that ends up subpar. The biggest problem that Red Wolf has is that the archetypes he hooks into are not very good. Red Wolf is telling you to have a lot of cards in your hand and to not play those cards until later in the game. This would not normally be a huge problem, but it is kind of a problem right now, because right now you are very heavily incentivized in mid-range style decks to play as many of your cards as you can to get those Thanos stone procs, because Thanos is sitting on top of mid-range. And if you're not going to be playing Thanos, well, you need a very compelling reason to be doing something that isn't that. That is, unfortunately, Red Wolf's ultimate flaw. He is not a compelling enough reason to be doing any of the things that he's asking you to do. The other big thing is that Red Wolf hooks into, more directly than just the general space he's in, 2 specific archetypes. Archetypes being Devil Dinosaur and Bounce. Those archetypes are not good. Now, Marvel Snap did do an early announcement of their OTA. And in the process, they announced that Hawkeye would be getting a buff. I decided to cover that OTA early announcement when the OTA actually dropped to avoid confusion, so still do expect a full video on it tomorrow. That said, the Hawkeye buff is the kind of thing that Bounce actually might need. This is going to be changed to a card that actually gets +4 power instead of +3. That's really compelling in a world where we're trying to bounce stuff, and that is definitely what Red Wolf's incentives are. The problem is, A, that hasn't happened yet, and B, if it does happen, I might be more incentivized to try to copy my Hawkeye with things like Frigga than I am going to be to play Red Wolf. And we can also talk about the other home. It's not that Devil Dinosaur is bad per se, it's more that the shape of card that Devil Dinosaur is has gotten dramatically worse. Devil Dinosaur, Ronin, Darkhawk, these are 5-drops that are doing one thing, and they're directly competing with Thanos Fractured Frontier, who is doing a lot of things, and his quest is not dramatically harder than Devil Dinosaur's when you really get down to it. Yes, you are able to do a little bit more with Devil Dinosaur in terms of fitting him into your deck, but I honestly kind of think that a lot more archetypes can support a Thanos Fractured Frontier, and that his average output is significantly above those 3 cards, such that they are some of the cards that have been the most hurt by Thanos Fractured Frontier's release. And this is definitely bleeding into Red Wolf. Like, I know I started by praising Thanos Fractured Frontier, Jane Foster, and Psylocke for being cards that are actually new and exciting. And I know plenty of Marvel Snap creators have been, wow, it's awesome. They made cards that are actually good. Finally, we get to do something. But I do think that as creators, that incentive is a little bit different than their incentive as a company, because I think this is definitely one of the cases where a card they made last week is actively hurting a card they made this week, because not necessarily it is stronger, it is, but because it is better to do that thing, and that thing does not play well with this one. It's easy to get caught up in this and say, oh, well, Thanos Fractured Frontier wants you to quick draw stuff, and Red Wolf wants you to quick draw stuff. And that's true, but what Thanos Fractured Frontier wants from you in deck building is a bunch of cheap cards that you're going to play a lot of. And so that means that when you're doing the quick draw on Red Wolf, you're going to have less cards in your hand for that to happen on. And so you kind of just end up with a card that doesn't really have a home in any of the decks that want to play the card that came out the week before, and the things that it's trying to be part of, Bounce and Devil Dinosaur, well, you need a really compelling reason to be trying to do any of that stuff, and right now, Thanos is sitting on top of both of them. First up is Pseudo Bounce, Red Wolf by night, First up is Pseudo Bounce. There are two wolves inside you. One of them is very strong. The other one is red. Let's see if you can guess which one I'm talking about here. This is a deck that does not need Red Wolf. This is a deck that would love to play a normal game of Marvel Snap without drawing Red Wolf, and then you just sometimes play him so he's cool when you quick draw him. But frankly, the way this deck plays out, there's already so much dictating your plays that the really only time you're going to play Red Wolf is when you quick draw him, because then he's also going to be a Thanos proc, and you'd be playing any card that you drew just to get the Thanos proc, so what are we really doing here? He's a nice addition, but it definitely feels like this is a card that needs some additional power. I'm not saying this is a bad deck by any means, but if it is a good deck, it is not by virtue of Red Wolf. It is by virtue of the other 11 cards that are happening in this context. A semi-bounce archetype is what's going on here. The bounce stuff is part and parcel of the Sholau package, which is part and parcel of the Thanos package, which is all contributing to, like, maybe getting something to be a little bit cheaper than it should be. Confusion on the final turn of the game. Oh, I'm playing a bunch of stuff. I'm playing a slightly discounted Sholau. I'm playing a slightly discounted Thanos, which is going to allow me to, with this combination of the Surge, play on 5 a 2-drop that got Surged, and also Thanos that got wing beated, and my opponent isn't going to be prepared for that. And that's kind of the ethos here. That's kind of the whole thing that's going on here, is we're going to be confusing. They're not going to know where our power is. We're going to have a lot of cool stuff going on. We can do things like use Thanos's clone to get 2 werewolves by night. That's an awesome play that you should definitely look into making. And between Merlin's skills disappearing and your ability to pick cards up off the board, you can absolutely make plays like that happen. They're very powerful when they do. There's enough to be said about the good cards in this deck. It's just I'm not very convinced that Red Wolf is one of them. He's like fine, but he's hardly special. From the Bounce One Trick himself, Doc Guapo, there is this version of the archetype, which has a couple of small appealing things that I do particularly enjoy. Investing in bouncing Boomerang and Red Wolf with your Toxin and Beast means that you get to go a little bit taller than I think people are used to seeing from the cards that are being bounced, and that's not nothing. There's some actual ability to make seriously large units there some of the time, but I do think that, honest to God, the biggest problem I have with Red Wolf is I don't actually feel like he's meaningfully better than Boomerang, and I think the more I sit around and, like, the more experience I get, the more I'm afraid that what I'm going to come to the conclusion of is that this card is actually worse Boomerang, and not even close to, like, comparable Boomerang, which is sort of where I have him right now. There's a very real chance that my conclusion on Red Wolf in a week or so is worse Boomerang. And that is just not a serious card that we can talk about in terms of, is this going to win you games? And I think it's been pretty clear as the course of this video has continued that Red Wolf is not going to win you games for a variety of reasons related to metagame positioning, but it's also important to point out that he's just not that good. A secondary, tertiary, I guess, bounce list, because they're all bounce lists when we talk about Red Wolf. I guess it's probably time to talk about why I don't have a Dino list on here. It's because I don't think Dino's good. Not only is it getting absolutely mogged by Thanos, the biggest problem Dino has is you want your big 5-drop to win one lane, and slapping a big 5-drop in an empty lane is a recipe for getting soul stoned off of Thanos right now. I am a pretty big believer, like, before the card came out, I was like, soul stone's the best one. This is the one that's, and I don't know if it's per se the best one. I think in these bounce decks, you're really looking for the green stone, the time stone, to get your hand discounted a little more than you're looking for soul stones specifically. There is some context to it, but if you forced me to rank them, I would say soulstone is still the best one, not necessarily in every context, but in enough of them that I think it's probably true. And that is a big problem for cards like Ronin and Dino and Darkhawk that we talked about already. Like, it's not just that Thanos is better than them at their job of being a big guy, because he's a big guy that does some other stuff and then sometimes moves. It's also that if you play them in the same lane, Thanos is going to kill them. And the big point of those cards is that you are usually playing the game such that they are winning their own lane. And if you're trying to set them up such that they win their own lane, and then you also have to invest something else there so they don't get obliterated, that is a real additional cost that makes them contextually worse as game pieces, not just in the context of Thanos is better than them, but in the context of he is good against them specifically and the way those decks tend to play. So yes, this is going to be the last deck of the video, and we are going to talk about yet another bounce list, because that is kind of the only thing I think I see Red Wolf being meaningfully helpful in. And that is unfortunate. It's not his fault that the payoffs for the other half of him, the half that you actually get every game, are not very good. It's not his fault. It's okay. Like it's not all his fault. But it is the reality he lives in right now. I just don't think there's enough to be a deck that's playing Red Wolf, Devil, Dinosaur right now, in large part because the big linchpin of your deck is so bad. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. That's been KM Cat. You can see her back there. I just a little table. And she's just on, instead of jumping on me, she jumped on the table instead. And I will see you in the next one. We'll see if she will. Have a wonderful evening.